Born in 1888, T.S. Eliot became a leading 20th century writer. His intellectual explorations and personal struggles shaped his work, culminating in his move to England and embrace of modernism. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a modernist masterpiece exploring the anxieties of a middle-aged man paralyzed by indecision. Prufrock embodies the struggles of modern life, overwhelmed by societal pressures and grappling with existential questions of love, death, and meaning in a fragmented world. Prufrock's inability to declare his love stems from fear of rejection, reflecting the alienation and isolation of modern urban life. The poem uses stream of consciousness, letting Prufrock's unfiltered thoughts mirror his chaotic inner world. Eliot uses vivid imagery and literary allusions to reveal Prufrock's inner turmoil. The poem's fragmented structure reflects his fractured state, a perfect example of the uncertainty defining modern life. In a short poem, Eliot powerfully portrays a man struggling with his flaws and the pressures of modern life. Prufrock's timeless exploration of human vulnerability and the search for meaning continues to resonate today.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of our podcast on modern literature. I'm your host Shadman Sakib and this is my co-host
Tanjila, Tabassum, Turny.
And today we're joined by Theotonius Gomes. Sir, hello sir.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's my pleasure to be in the podcast too.
So let's start our podcast today with a question. Turny, what was the question?
Guys, have you ever asked yourself that, am I good enough or should I speak up?
If you've ever asked yourself such questions, maybe you can relate to the central character of the poem this episode is on, J. Alfred Prufrock. But before we can get started on the character or the poem, let's talk about the poet, T.S. Eliot, or Thomas Stern Eliot, who was born in 1888 in Missouri, USA. Eventually, he moved to London, where he earned a citizenship in England. He also earned a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. Sir, tell us a little bit about T.S. Eliot's general style of writing in his poetry and the kind of themes he usually wrote about.
Right. Eliot belongs to the Modernists, and he was one of the foremost modernists in English poetry. And modernism as a movement was very heavily influenced by the French modernist poets, Baudelaire and Mallarmé and Rimbaud. And T.S. Eliot, when writing, he said that poetry should capture the complexity of modernity, and which may make the language a little difficult. And that's the style he wrote. His poetry is not very easily understood. He's filled with allusions, filled with tight imagery, filled with symbols, and he believed in that poetry, the language of poetry may be a little difficult, and he believed in writing under the tradition of poet. Every poet must appear with the bigger tradition of his predecessors, and in his essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, he mentioned that. If you consider the themes, he wrote about alienation, fragmentation. One of his very celebrated poem is The Wasteland, where we find a tremendous amount of intertextuality and again dealing with the isolation of modern man, the alienation, fragmentation, and all those, the ennui, the existential crisis. Those things came in, the byproducts of modernity found their theme in Eliot's poetry.
So loneliness is a very central theme in a lot of his poems.
Exactly.
Very, very much a product of time, you could say.
Yeah.
With the industrial era coming in and the modern life as we see it now, it was the beginning of that almost, which basically he tried to capture with a lot of his writing and a lot of his poems, I imagine.
Yes, exactly. If we talk about J. Alfred Prufrock, it was first published in 1915, and we all know that the World War I was going on from 1914 to 1918. So during the World War, it has a tremendous impact on creating on the psyche of Prufrock, and that was one thing. And the other factor was mass industrialization, and that also was was bringing in further materialistic pursuit, further materialistic society, and the earlier traditions of bonding, family bonding, and human harmony. Those things were shifted by this tremendous massive war and massive industrialization. People were getting alienated from each other. Societal interaction became artificial, and all these things, this alienation, artificiality, the spiritual aridity, the futility, all these things came in Eliot's writing, found their way in Eliot's writing.
It reminds me of the thing that we talked about in a previous episode, where we were comparing romanticism with modernism and how they are somewhat antithesis of each other to a certain degree.
Yes, true, to an extent that they are.
Modernism was, because of the massive industrialization and the wars, shifted more and more towards the idea of, as you said, like materialism, and eventually turning into consumerism, I imagine, to a degree, which kind of like shifted away from the spiritualist aspects that was in previous eras of literature, I imagine. So with that out of the way, let us talk about the poem itself, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It begins with a bit from Dante's Inferno, from the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno. Could you tell us the significance of that bit added at the beginning?
Exactly. Eliot deliberately brings in this reference from Inferno, from Dante, as he was tremendously impacted by the European poets. And the lines that he puts in the epilogue is something somewhat foreshadows the whole character of Prufrock and his condition and his mental condition and his psychological state. The epilogue is written in a very somber mode. It's very heavy and somber, and it talks about a soul who is trapped in the hell, which is what Prufrock was going through. A
Similar feeling.
very similar feeling. He was going through tremendous amount of depression, self-doubt, and he was in a hellish condition himself, which he could not break free from. And the epilogue foreshadows that. It kind of foreshadows that condition of depression, the condition of self-doubt, the condition of being trapped, being stuck in a moment and not being able to be out. So that's what the epilogue, the prologue, symbolizes.
Also talk about the present world, because we are getting isolated. We are living in a bubble, and we don't want to actually burst that bubble and enjoy the world that is outside.
We're almost afraid of
yeah,
that.
we're
Yeah.
almost afraid of that. So we can actually give example of ourselves.
Exactly. Our condition in modern Dhaka life is with the massive internetization has made us live in our bubbles, our own bubbles. The virtual has set in, and it's not an uncommon thing to see in a drawing room. Everybody's on their phone rather than having chatting, rather than having real conversation, real-time conversation.
Before we go further into the themes, I did have another question about his technique with this poem specifically. He didn't follow like the standard orthodox line schemes or anything, did he? It was a lot more unorthodox, his style of writing.
Yes, he used free verse in it, and a lot of critics say that it's a dramatic monologue where the listener is silent and doesn't contribute to the discourse. Prufrock addresses the listener, and the poem begins with "Let us go, then you and I." And there's so much of speculation. There's so much of speculation. Who is this you that Prufrock is addressing to?
And there's no response from the person he's speaking to. So this would kind of count as a dramatic monologue.
Yes, exactly.
And would you say there's also a bit of stream of consciousness in this?
Yeah. Prufrock goes on to give us his interior, what's happening inside. He goes on to I mean, this, although this is dramatic monologue, but a lot of the poem of J. Alfred Prufrock is also interior monologue, where he is just asking himself, shall I presume, or how can I presume? Do I dare? Do I dare disturb the universe? And how shall I proceed? So he's asking himself those questions in this interior monologue. We can say it's a interior monologue inside the dramatic monologue.
It's like almost an inception of like a monologue within a monologue.
Monologue within a monologue, you can say that.
Can you tell us like why Prufrock is so worried about what others will think? Like he's always like thinking like what people will think. I'm bald, or what about my hair?
Yeah.
Like
I think
he's talking about himself. He's criticizing himself, but no one is actually criticizing him. It's only him.
Well, yeah, good question. Yeah, definitely a self-loathing. Good question. Well, the thing is, Prufrock is too self-conscious. That's one of his problems. That adds to his problem. Just like overthinking adds to the problem of anxiety. So Prufrock is definitely delved into this lot of anxiety, and one of these anxieties is social anxiety. And the moment there is mass industrialization, there is mass materialism there is mass also artificiality, aridity. So the social interactions were very much about showing off rather than being real or genuine. People were looking for chit chats that are artificial, not genuinely caring for each other. For example, this refrain that comes back, that in the room women come and go talking about Michelangelo, and it's not necessarily they were art enthusiasts, but it was more of an intake to talk about art. Very shallow and showing off. That we know about Michelangelo, the women were showing off.
It's like very cool thing.
Very cool thing.
And also that line is repeated twice in the poem, almost like a mundane cycle that happens again and again without any like
any actual value or significance. So you see this, we observe this, that Prufrock was, again going back to that question, was too self-conscious, and he knew that people around him, although they may not say directly, but they are sort of judging him, and he was afraid of that judgment. He didn't want to receive that judgment, and he said, "Oh, I should wear the bottom of my trouser roll. I'm growing old. Oh, look, they will say, look at my arms and legs. They're so thin, and my bald headedness." So it's most of it is in Prufrock's head. It's inside what's going on inside his mind.
That is a very interesting thing, because I noticed that because it's a dramatic monologue, all the negativity that is described about him is from himself. None of the people he actually thinks would say such things ever seem to say any of that. And another thing that I really like, it's very striking, because Prufrock himself seems to be a fine person. He doesn't seem to be like that old. He dresses well from some of the descriptions that we read. Like, he wears a nice shirt, he puts a pin on, he's dressed well, and all that. So it definitely feels like a extreme level of anxiety that he's feeling. And I feel like that circles back to that idea of like people becoming lonelier, and that causes them to become more self-conscious because they're not like socially comfortable anymore in this era. Is that basically what it is?
Yeah. So Prufrock was definitely depressed, and one of the things that contributed, major things that contributed to this was his anxiety and his self-doubt. He's constantly asking questions to himself. And interestingly, I'm teaching Prufrock now, and I was telling my students to take note of the questions that he asks. And these questions are in his mind. He's constantly questioning himself. Do I dare? Do I dare? Do I disturb the universe? Do I dare disturb the universe? Shall I presume, or how shall I presume? So he's constantly in a state of self-doubt. He's asking himself too many questions. And those questions, that's the only action that we find in Prufrock, because he's so irresolute. He cannot decide. He cannot come to a decision. He cannot come to a resolution. Although the desire for recognition, the desire for love, the desire for a genuine connection lurks inside him. He cannot decide to make the proceed, and he says, do not ask the question, what is the overwhelming question? And I was asking my students, if it's a romantic setting, what would be an overwhelming question that Prufrock would ask to someone else, or probably to a date? And probably the overwhelming question is, will you go out with me? Will you marry me? Will you be mine? Those questions. But
very daunting for him.
Yeah, but these questions are too daunting for him. He doesn't proceed. He's too much analysis leads to paralysis. Just like that, he's as if paralyzed in his own mind.
Maybe he's asking himself question because he doesn't have that courage.
Yeah, lack of confidence.
Courage to ask the same question to others and hear the reality that he already knows, but still, maybe he doesn't have that courage.
Exactly. He lacks courage. He lacks courage. And one of the crises, we were listing the crisis of Prufrock, and one of the major crises that he has is insecurity.
Yeah.
And he's insecure about asking even a question. He's insecure about proceeding. Although the desire for a genuine relationship, desire for love lurks within him.
There's a fear of like intimacy. There's
yeah.
a very strong fear of intimacy.
There is fear of intimacy.
There's also a very strong fear of him growing old, like aging. That is something that keeps coming back up. He keeps talking about how his hair is thinning, and he talks about how people would look at him and they would be judging him for becoming older, the fear of aging.
Well, yeah, we can say that Prufrock is going through that midlife crisis. And one of my students in the class was telling that, sir, teenagers and midlife crisis have some similarities.
They do have certain
similarities about appearance, about look, which Prufrock is very uncomfortable with. About not fitting in, not about not being able to ask the questions, about questioning yourself.
Constant anxiety and
constant state of anxiety.
Because you're like, this is almost feels like a new stage of your life, and you're like not sure how to proceed with any of that. And it feels almost like it is very obvious, but the anxiety, again, as being the central theme, almost feels crippling for Prufrock. One of my favorite lines from the poem is after he talks about like how he's thinking about asking questions, like, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floor of silent seas. Which made me think a bit, what's he talking about? Then I realized he wished he wanted to be a crab underwater, which is extremely humorous, but also like very relatable. It's like he would rather be this non-sentient animal underwater than be a human in this like situation where he has to think and fit in.
Because he wants to just escape from reality. He doesn't want to face that.
That's a very good point that you have said. He wants to escape, and he fears the reality, and he would rather be a non-human entity. And that brings in the dehumanizing effect of world war. That brings in the dehumanizing effect of intense materialism, which due to the industrialization, mass industrialization was going on around Prufrock, and all those things affected him. And in another instant, one of my favorite pair of lines from Prufrock is wriggling on the wall, pinned as pinned, wriggling on the wall, wriggle on the wall as an insect. He would rather be an insect. He would rather be a crab than to be questioned.
Actual human being.
Talk. Who has to be resolute, who has to be courageous and face the situation, face the condition, face the people.
Again, it just circles back to like that isolation changing you into like not being a very social animal anymore. Stops the human aspect of socialization kind of like gets crippled because of the situation.
We cannot blame Prufrock entirely for it, because as we were talking about the woman and the other men, it was a lot of artificiality rather than genuine connection in social interaction. That the time was about showing off.
What somebody wearing, what somebody owning.
Exactly. Talking about art, talking about something that is fashionable, something that is, talking about food. Being art savvy was the in thing. And those things, those artificiality was very apparent in Prufrock's observant mind. He was very good in observation, and he also wanted to escape from there.
The other thing that another line that I think was very central to the poem, I felt like personally, was the bit where he talks about how he will never be Prince Hamlet.
Yeah.
And that he felt like he was just one of the minor lords in the scene who's just there to continue on the story, maybe say a few lines, be a little funny, or insert a few information or knowledge of the drama further, but he'll never be an actual central character. Like, he's not the hero of his story, which also feels very in line with the idea of the modern literature in a way.
Exactly. Modern literature focuses a lot about the anti-hero elements, whereas in the Shakespearean Hamlet is considered to be one of the most adorable figures and adorable man. Where Hamlet and Prufrock has certain similarities and dissimilarities. The similarity part is Hamlet begins with inaction. Hamlet is full with questions, many questions, and he wanted to be sure about and get the answer about the question before being resolute to avenge his father. And Prufrock is also full of questions and self-doubt. However, the Shakespeare's play in terms of Hamlet, eventually Hamlet ventures to action. He does act, although be it too late and causing many deaths for that. But in the end, he does take revenge. However, Prufrock is not able to. He's frozen. He's paralyzed. He cannot go for action.
There is also the similarity of them both having very long, very dramatic monologues.
Exactly.
That seems like a very common. Another thing that I do want to mention, we're moving away from the themes and the central sort of ideas of the poem for a bit. T.S. Eliot has this very incredible way of setting the setting, like the imagery that he uses. I think the most iconic one that I think everybody remembers is the cat-like smoke, that yellow fog that wraps around everything. It really like paints a picture for all. It's like, I understand the smoke is supposed to be like industrial London and the pollution and everything. It's like, how do you like? Could you tell us a little bit about like how he uses imagery in his poetry in this style that is very different from, I think, a lot of poets that came before him?
Yeah, exactly. Eliot does a brilliant job in bringing in this feline image of this cat and the yellow fog rubbing its back on the window pane, the yellow fog and its contrast with the shoots of the chimney. So he's basically referring to the latent desire. The yellow fog, it kind of foreshadows the desire for him of Prufrock for love and genuine connection, and even making love. However, that is suspended. He hesitates. He kind of suppresses his desire for love and for intimacy. So the yellow fog and the cat image definitely, as we know in literature, cat image brings in the element of sensuality. So in an elegant manner, the elegance and the sensuality. So that yellow fog rubbing its back on the window pane, it hints to the suggestion of intimacy, desire, the latent desire, the suppressed desire that Prufrock has. He is filled with desire, but he cannot express it. He cannot bring it out. He cannot approach it.
Another point of the poem that I remember pretty nicely was when he says something about, he talks about how it's difficult for him to really express his opinions. And then he talks about the magic lantern and how he wishes that it could project an image of his nerves that his partner could read, so they could tell what is on his mind instead of, just saying it himself, because it's difficult for him to say. I didn't actually know what a magic lantern is when I read the poem the first time. And then I realized, like, I found from a different thing later on what it is. It's like a projector. And it's like, it's an old-timey projector that projects something on a light with a plate in front of the light, it expands the image. So it really emphasizes on Prufrock's inability to sort of um, express himself, as you said. It's like it's hard for him to really like talk about anything on his mind, and it really is difficult because, as you said, he's paralyzed from expressing himself at all in any way. He's afraid constantly. So
And yeah, his paralysis is intensified for his over self consciousness. What happens? He says that, what if I presume, what if I ask those questions? And the woman would say, oh, that is not at all, that is not what it is, that is not what I meant at all. As if he knows that even if he proposes, even if he asks that overwhelming question to his would-be partner, he would be rejected. He's already, before even asking the question, presumes, and he accepts that as his ultimate answer. So what is the point of approaching someone? So he finds it futile to do that.
brings this up again multiple times, which I think adds to that repetitive thing with the poem, where it's like same thing happening again and again. There's like this mundane nothing that is going on. It's like there's no substance to everything that's happened.
Yeah, remember that line that I have measured my life in coffee spoons. So think about all the achievements that he has had so far, all the meaning that he could think about his life, and so far his way of looking at life. It could be measured on coffee spoon. And as when I talk about this with my students, I say, think about teaspoon, how big that is, how insignificant, and how
He's actually agreeing, like his life is not that much right.
yeah.
Which again is like emphasized with the Hamlet line.
His life, you can measure the happiness, you can measure the work he's doing.
What he's doing. You can measure the meaning, that what gives him meaning. So his life doesn't have a lot of meaning, a lot of genuine bonds, which makes life worth living. He doesn't have a purpose. That's another thing. He lacks the purpose. There is a lack of purpose in the poem, and it has that coming back again, the same preoccupations. There is a bit of repetitiveness in the poem.
All of that just kind of culminates into like an inaction.
Exactly.
Like he's paralyzed and he can't act because he doesn't have a purpose to act on. He doesn't have the motivation to actually change anything because it feels like a cycle. It's his anxiety at the end of the day that sort of feels like it's paralyzing him permanently. As reality is almost like overwhelming. Speaking of reality, the final bit of the poem is pretty interesting to me because he speaks of mermaids, which obviously are imaginary in his mind. One of the things I noticed there is he almost seems more comfortable about the mermaids than actual women to a certain degree. Like he speaks about spending quite a bit of time with them. I think it was like when the wind blows, the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea. It seems the imaginary company he has in his head, even though he's still self-demeaning himself here, he thinks that mermaids will not sing to him. He seems to be a lot more comfortable in his mind than he is with reality, which in the final line, as I said, still human voices wake us and we drown. He almost finds reality.
It's a harsh.
It's harsh reality, and he almost feels like it's drowning him forcefully.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to escape. At the end of the poem, he wants to escape, and he would rather be with the mermaids. But then he is so disturbed, so full of anxiety, self-doubt, and so full of self-consciousness that he thinks that even if the mermaids sing, they won't sing to him, and he wouldn't be part of that soothing, the lull effect of songs, even of the mermaids, of something that he idolizes. And then the sea, the idea of sea comes in. Sea symbolizes freedom. Sea symbolizes his escape. His escape from the overwhelming situation, the crisis of modernity, the crisis that paralyzes him, the self-doubt, the self-belittlement, all that inflicts him. He wants to escape by drowning into the sea, and sea for him is a wide expanse, opening him up from the shallowness, the spiritual identity, the alienation of the modernist society, of modernity.
The kind of fear Prufrock have we still seen that fear in people's today. So what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, Prufrock is very much relatable with the kind of turn we have in our around us in our society, and no wonder mental health is in such a decline, and anyone with the complexity of not being able to cope with the outer reality and suffering inwardly coping may find connection with Prufrock. And that's where this poem finds relevance in today's world.
Yeah, with modern internet, particularly social media, it feels like the anxiety-inducing situation that Prufrock constantly found himself feels even more sort of relevant and relatable to people nowadays, because you are constantly in the mind the thought process of being judged by others when you post something online. So you have to make it perfect, otherwise people will say this and comment something that's, you know, undesirable and such. And I think we talked about this before the podcast started. So the internet creates like a bubble around us, and we're kind of like, it comes back to the central theme of loneliness, which is a whole thing in modern life.
Even a few hours ago, I was actually thinking like Prufrock, like when I will shoot the podcast, it has to be it has to be perfect.
Yeah, otherwise
can't
people are
do-
gonna watch
yeah,
it
I
and
can't do it.
make fun of you.
Yeah,
Hopefully that's not gonna happen, but the internet is the internet.
yeah. So it's like I
We
was
can't
afraid
control
of
other people's
judging.
reaction
Yeah.
Yeah, we
to
can't control
our
it.
situations.
I think that is another very like central theme to the poem is Prufrock is afraid of letting go of control. Almost like he's afraid of like not having control over things, right? Like to a degree, it's like he doesn't have control over what other people say to him or say about him, and that is another extra layer of fear almost for him.
Yeah, you can put it in that way also. We can put it in that light as well.
So yeah, the modern day seems to be a very almost a prophecy in a way for what T.S. Eliot wrote about the life of man in a society that was built upon a post-industrial world. It is quite unfortunate, but it is the reality. This is a very permeating theme throughout most of his work, I imagine. Even The Wasteland does it to a certain degree as well. But yeah, I think we have covered nearly everything with the poem. Do you have any further questions, person? No? Well, with that, we will end our episode for today. Thank you again for joining us, sir.
You're welcome. It was just a pleasure.
It was wonderful to have you with us, discussing this incredible poem. And with that, we will end our.
Yes, my pleasure. It was wonderful to talk about Prufrock and interact with you. It was very lively interaction. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching us.